Revolution of 1789. An arrogant, an extravagant, and a total disgrace to their as the privileged classes. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my dear viewers. My name is Henry the Teacher, and please, I kindly request you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, The History Digest, so that you confirm your attendance in every lesson I do conduct, okay? So today we are going to look at the French Revolution, and in order for you to understand this, you first need to know the meaning of the word revolution in the history context. In the confines of history, a revolution generally means a fundamental or a radical change in the established order of the society. And revolutions typically take form of organized movements aimed at effecting change in the political, social, and economic atmosphere of that very given society. Therefore, revolutions normally born when the social climate changes and the political system does not react to the kind. In turn, people rise up against the government in a need to change the status quo. So, by translating this to the French Revolution, we shall say that the French Revolution was the fundamental change that took place in France between May 1789 to November 1799. During this period, France was under the leadership of dictatorial Bourbonese monarchy of the ancient regime, under the leadership of King Louis XVI, who had married Marie Antoinette, an Austrian woman, which Austrian woman was considered by the French subjects, all masses, as being an illiterate one, extravagant two, an arrogant three, and a total disgrace to the French society. Not only that, she was also considered to be part and partial to their political, social, and economic distress. You should take a note that by the time the French Revolution broke out, the Bourbonese monarchy had already established a three-state system of hierarchy in which France was divided into three classes or three estates. Name of them: the first estate being that of the clergy, the second estate of the nobility, and the third estate of the commoners, or which you can call the peasants and the middle class. The first and the second classes referred themselves to as the privileged classes, simply because they enjoyed a lot of privileges as compared to the third estate. The third estate did not enjoy any of the privileges in the French society. It was so unfair, and the seeds of the French Revolution were cultivated from there. Unfairness, which was in the government, mistreatment of the third estate, isolation of the third estate, considering only the first class and the second class as the only class of people in France, as the only ones to enjoy all the freedoms. They had the freedom of speech, they had the freedom of association, which freedoms were never enjoyed by the third estate. You understand? So, the first estate was made up of the clergy. And this class comprised of the church leaders and the priests, whose role was to run the activities of the Catholic Church and some aspects in the state or in the government. They were exempted from taxation, meaning they were not supposed to pay taxes. They enjoyed free things. They used to tour abroad on state funds. They were given responsibility of keeping records and registers for birth, death, and marriage. And to make matters worse, the government had given them powers to levy the 10% tax in form of tithe. In brief, church tithe was made compulsory, and it was supposed to be paid by the members of the third estate. It was unfair. Can you imagine people being run after, captured, and putting them in jail for failure to pay the church tithe? It was so unfair. Then the second class was that of the nobility. And this class comprised of all the members of the royal family. Here we mean the relatives, the king and the queen. Like the first class of the clergy, these ones also enjoyed a lot of privileges. They owned land. They were exempted from paying taxes. They used to tour abroad on state funds. They used to organize banquets in the king's palace every now and then, all of which contributed to the bankruptcy of the French treasury, which became a factor still to the outbreak of the French Revolution. The third estate, and it was the marginalized one, was that of the commoners, or what you can call the peasants and the middle class. This comprised of all the men and the women who were not belonging to either the first or the second estate. And to make matters worse, this marginalized class was making the majority of the population, 96%, as compared to only the 4% that was shared by the first and the second estate. Because the first estate was made up of 3% of the population, and the second estate of the nobility was making only 1% of the total population. So the only population, the minority population, was enjoying all of the privileges at the expense of the majority peasants. That's so unfair. So it is believed that this unfairness was the main cause of this revolution, as we shall be seeing. And you can really see by now that reaching 1789, the relationship between the three classes, or between the third estate and the other two classes, was already soured to cause a revolution at any time. What they were waiting for was only the spark of factor for them to go in for a revolution, to see that they could change their country and get what they called equality, liberty, and fraternity, which values were missing in the French society. They looked at themselves as being mistreated instead of being governed by the government. Okay? So as I have said that they were looking for the spark of factor, this spark of, or the immediate cause, came as a result of the increased population in the French society. Between 1700 to 1789, the population of France increased from 18 million people to 26 million people. This increase in population resulted into large number of unemployment. And this unemployment was accompanied by a sharp increase in the prices of food. Why food? it is because of the bad harvests of 1787 and 1788, which we termed as the bad harvest, the 2 years of bad harvest. These years were characterized by heavy rainfall, frost, which ended up destroying the crops, to make the French masses lack of food. It means famine had to come in. Famine came in, yet they were very poor, meaning that they had no money to buy food. That condition was later accompanied by the inflation, all of which caused widespread social distress, which in turn made the financial reformer or financial minister by the name of Necker to advise King Louis XVI to call or to summon the Estate General Meeting. When we talk of the Estate General Meeting, we mean the French Parliament. This parliament had been abolished for more than 175 years, because before the calling of the Estate General Meeting, France had spent 175 years without having this meeting or this parliament meeting to discuss the issues affecting the masses. Their last parliament had last sat in 1614. Can you imagine how the problems of the common people were being solved? No, they were not being handled, which made the situation to go sour. So by the time the king summoned this meeting, this parliament, the situation was already sour. He couldn't change nothing. People were tired. They had to revolt and change the status of their country. This Estate General Meeting was represented by all the 3 classes. All the 3 estates attended. They discussed, agreed on certain issues, but they failed to agree on 2 things. Which things? The seating arrangement in their parliament and the voting arrangements. Okay? The seating arrangement was to be conducted in a way that the first 2 classes were to sit in a separate room, in their own room. For them, they were bosses. They did not want to be joined by the 3rd estate. They didn't want to sit with the commoners. That was the sitting arrangement, which the first class and the second class were advocating for. And in return, the 3rd estate, for it was insisting that if we are to discuss matters of national importance, we have to sit in one room as the first class, second class, and the 3rd estate. We are not going to sit in the separate room. So in brief, the 3rd estate wanted all the 3 classes to sit in one room and discuss the issues, whereas the first and the second estates wanted to sit alone, and the 3rd estate sits in a different room. It was unfair, and it was rejected, totally rejected by the 3rd estate. The second disagreement was on the voting arrangement, whereby the first and the second estate wanted the voting to be conducted basing on class basis of 1 class, 1 vote. Remember, there were only 3 classes. So whenever there was an issue to be discussed and the voting was to be conducted, the first class and the second class would vote in their favor. And there is no way how the third estate would win an argument, because an estate was to mean a vote, meaning that the third estate, being that it was the majority, it would be having only one vote, and the other side would be having two votes. That was totally rejected by the third estate, which third estate for it wanted voting to be basing on one man, one vote. And remember, they were the ones making the majority of the population. So if voting was to go on that way, there is no way how the first and the second estates would win. That's why they kept on insisting. The first estate and the second estate were saying voting to be based on class basis. One class, one vote. Wherever there is an issue, we vote basing on classes. Each class brings in one vote. Whereas the third estate was saying, no, we have to base on individual voting, one by one. And after the voting, we have to count. Who had the majority? It was the third estate. So when they failed to disagree on those matters, the members of the third estate, or the representatives of the third estate, decided to separate themselves from the estate general meeting, and they decided to go and form their own assembly, or their own parliament, which they named the National Assembly, to leave the estate general for only the nobles and the clergy. Parliament y'abantu, the National Assembly. You get my point? So the king, the nobles and the clergy did not agree with the decision of the third estate, which third estate had resorted to sitting at the nearby building known as the Tennessee Court. So on 20th of June 1789, the king sent a messenger because he had feared of the possible outcomes of that group. He feared that a revolution could come anytime. So he sent a messenger on 20th to call them back. They rejected, and with the leadership of Count Millerby, they ended up taking an oath, ordering this messenger to go back and tell his master that they were there by the will of the people and they would not leave until the point of death. So that one came to be known as the Tennessee Court Oath. And definitely by that they were saying, or they were declaring a revolution officially. You understand? So they declared Tennessee Court to be their parliament, to be the building where they would sit in case they had any matter to discuss. Not until they form a constitution of their own. Upon the advice of the nobles and the clergy, the king ended up calling or inviting the Swiss army to help him disperse these people who had ran out of control. When the Switzerland soldiers came, or the Swiss army came in, the people of France started organizing revolts everywhere, across the country. Revolts, which revolts came up with some events, which events were so instrumental in the French Revolution. Take an example of what we call the storming of Bastille on 14th of July 1789 rather. Bastille was the national prison where opponents of the government would be imprisoned or were being imprisoned. Not only the opponents of the government, but even the victims of the later decachets. Later decachets, those were cheats, small cheats that were signed by the king and sent to the authorities to arrest the bearers without being tried. Imprisonment without trial. And very many members of the Third Estate fall a victim. They were victimized by the later decachets. Those are one of the things which they got tired of to cause the revolution. Okay? So when the people, when the members or the Third Estate members, which were the majority, heard that the Swiss army had come to disperse their parliament, they started organizing revolts across the country, targeting government institutions. And I was saying that on 14th July 1789, Bastille was stormed. That was in the National Treasury. A journalist called Camilo de Simolins ended up organizing or heading a group of men and women to go and acquire firearms from the store. That store was called the Hotel de Ville, National Armory. The National Armory. And Armory is the place where the weapons are kept or are stored. So they went there, they looted the guns and the ammunitions, they headed to Bastille, the national prison. They defeated all the guards there and released all the prisoners. After releasing all the prisoners who later joined them, they set fire to that prison. It perished. Okay? So from that event, they acquired another event in August 26, 1789. Which event? The Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizens. That came to be their constitution. In that document, they ended up listing all what they needed in the revolution. They ended up granting themselves the three principles: liberty, equality, and fraternity, freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of worship, were all granted to them by that document, and it would be the document, it would be their constitution. Such an achievement. In 1792, they had weakened the Bourbonese monarchy, and most of the members of the clergy class and the nobles had fled into exile in Austria, where they formed an emigres force preparing to come back and attack the revolutionaries. basobole okutaasa ebiki ebyabwe. So in 1792, elections were conducted in which Maximilien Robespierre of the Jacobins Club ended up emerging the winner, and he took over leadership from 1792 until 1794 when he was guillotined. You understand? That formation of the conventional government of Maximilien Robespierre marked the first, the establishment of the first French Republic. And the people were yearning for a republic because they had tired of monarchism. They believed that monarchism was in form of dictatorship, no respect for human rights, no respect for freedoms, no respect for liberty. So they advocated for the establishment of a republic. And the first republic of France was formed in 1792 under the leadership of Maximilien Robespierre. Maximilien Robespierre failed to deliver what the masses or what the peasants wanted or expected from their revolution. And in 1794, he was captured, overthrown, and later executed. He was then replaced by the Directory government, which was also too weak to enforce the achievements of the French Revolution. It was also disappointment to the revolutionaries. It failed to achieve the objectives of the revolutionaries. It was too weak to defend their country. And they made sure that they changed that government to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1799. Thank you for watching, and we shall be discussing the causes of the French Revolution. What made the revolution inevitable? We shall be discussing those ones in the next lesson. Thank you. Have a good day.